Good morning. Yes, it's still morning, and it's been, I think, a really action-packed morning. And I hope you've enjoyed the program half as much as I have. I think this has been a tremendous exposure to a number of the key issues we're dealing with here in the Bay Area and the state of California and the country. And I think I'll just reflect for a moment on Leon Panetta's commentary on the need to lead from the center and bring parties together. And this really speaks to the core of what the Bay Area Council is all about, is coming together in a nonpartisan way, finding solutions to problems and acting on great ideas. Clear from him and from all of the speakers that the Bay Area remains the center place for the greatest innovation, which is a phenomenal strength that we have, among other strengths of our region. And at the same time, we have challenges. And so that will be the nature of the conversation as we go forward. And right now, we're going to talk about a powerhouse industry in the Bay Area, which is the life sciences. No question, this is the birthplace of life science. And before the COVID pandemic, according to the Industry Association Biocom's 2020 date book, the life sciences industry provided 481,000 jobs while supporting over 1.4 million jobs and generating 372 billion in total economic activity. It's clear that our region, where life sciences were born, remains the top place, the top cluster for that in our state. And anyone who's tracking what's happening in the real estate industry can see that there's a tremendous amount of focus going into preparing for the next phase of what's happening in an industry that's growing and has really become a centerpiece of our regional economy. To learn more about what's happening in this dynamic industry, the impacts of COVID, what's ahead, we are very, very pleased to welcome Joydeep Ganguly. He is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Operations for one of the industry's premier companies, Gilead Sciences. Gilead has been on the front lines of our nation's response to the COVID pandemic. Their antiviral remdesivir has been a critically important tool in reducing mortality among those with COVID, and that's just their latest accomplishment. So welcome, Joydeep, and let's dive right into it. How has the COVID pandemic changed the life sciences industry now, and how do you see that going into the future?
Great to be here, Jim, and thanks for the question. So at a broad level, what the pandemic did do was it sort of put the life sciences industry front and center. Companies like Moderna and Pfizer and Gilead became household names, and it sort of put a little bit of appreciation and a spotlight on the importance of fundamental research, innovation, and I think the importance of being a scientist and the role science can have in the entire human healthcare thesis. From a pandemic perspective, this also stressed the life sciences industry in ways that we weren't prepared for. As an example, one of the topics on people's mind right now is return to work and remote work and hybrid work. And when you're working in the life sciences industry, where you have the laboratory and the manufacturing facilities are a dominant part of your network, you don't often get the luxury of calling a timeout and having a complete remote workforce. Our research officers keep talking about you can't develop drugs over Zoom yet. And until that construct remains, it also forced us to do things like accelerate in areas like digital transformation and find ways to continue to be productive while at the same time recognizing that co-location and having our researchers adjacent to one another was a huge source of competitive advantage. So a roundabout way of me sort of saying the life sciences industry, not just thrived, but actually I think in this period, it forced us to rethink some of our business models to continue to be more productive. But at the same time, in many regards, the life sciences industry stayed the same because we still have a deep passion for the science and deep passion for human healthcare. And as such, a lot of our constructs in workspace, real estate, and infrastructure stayed the same. And we also doubled down on that to ensure that our scientists and our research engine were productive.
Clearly, something happened with COVID that was different than anything we've seen in our lifetime, which was a global commitment to coming up with a vaccine as well as treatments for the disease. And it's remarkable, the success of that, and we're bearing the fruit of it now. Is that going to be the way things are in the future? Is that the new normal?
It's a great question. I want to paraphrase this by saying that I think most of the life sciences company have a desire for speed and to get the drug to the clinic and the clinic to the patient as soon as possible. I think what the pandemic did do was it galvanized a burning platform. And that I think is, there are some really good things that happened last year, just in my space as well, in the way we accelerate development of infrastructure in a quicker manner, and things we did to sort of rally around the response that I think will stage it. I think, there are timelines we've sort of created, processes we've digitized. We've taken the simplest route possible. We didn't have the luxury of picking complicated routes to simple problems because we really had this pandemic as a headwind we had to overcome. There's a lot of good things in terms of business process re-engineering and just dealing with the entire process of moving things along the value chain that will remain. There is one aspect, and this is not more on the softer side of things, and I think what the pandemic also showed was companies that did well were companies that disproportionately prioritized leadership commitments and leadership values. And how people led during the pandemic was a huge, huge component. Companies that led with empathy, with care, with kindness, and put the employee at the center of everything were probably more successful than companies that just prioritize digital and how workers are productive. So besides the life sciences industry and the new sort of business processes that we've reimagined, I think there's been a redefinition of what it means to lead, which I think will carry on, and we'll all be collectively better off of that.
Yeah, I think that we certainly will. Obviously, a lot of the focus of this conference is about the Bay Area and what is the future of the Bay Area, and talk about the Bay Area in context of the life sciences industry. What is it that caused it to start up here or flourish here and continue here? What are you seeing as a trend there?
I mean, the Bay Area has got a tremendous advantage, primarily because of the talent. If you take a look at what our industry is characterized by, I mean, the life sciences industry, I mean, there is a very strong economics optimization construct that governs us, but innovation always trumps marginal value through optimizing a few dollars here and there. And in terms of creating an engine that is not just spurs innovation, but catalyzes innovation, I mean, the Bay Area is incomparable. If you take a look at where we got most of the companies, be it the Genentechs or the Gilead or the BioMarins or even the startup culture. And I think the other approach about the Bay Area that I think is a phenomenal asset is the way we're able to leverage each other's sort of strengths, each other's people, but also the relationships with academia that sort of create this engine that's very, very difficult to replicate. That's one of the reasons I think that you'll see, companies double down. I mean, if you look at Genentech's footprint, if you look at Gilead's footprint, there is this very overt recognition that scientific adjacencies and having really, really brilliant people co-located minimizes the static inertia we have to overcome to deliver innovation. Innovation in the minds of a scientist is just innovation, but bringing it to life is what I think the Bay Area is created this underlying infrastructure that I think is very difficult to replicate. And ironically, one of the things I struggled with last year was actually finding a way for our scientists to continue to be productive, which led to unintended consequences of me needing a lot more lab space in our footprint. So where everybody else was signaling, let's work from home, let's return, let's spread out, we were trying to find ways to get more people co-located in an area where we could drive therapies forward. And I think the notion of having this underlying infrastructure, this co-located adjacencies with the science, allows us to sort of unite on this common mission of collectively catalyzing the brilliance of the people that work in the Bay Area.
I think that's in line with what Meg Whitman said earlier when asked the question about how she saw the future of remote work versus collaborative workspace. And I guess the jury's probably not completely out on that, but based on the conversation you and I've had, it feels like the commitment to the Bay Area on the part of Gilead is very firm. And that your company, despite some of the added marginal costs, sees critical advantages here.
We do. I mean, our job is to advance human healthcare, and we're dealing with people with in unmet disease states, people with debilitating disease states, and you do that by actually making sure that you've got a relentless focus on the science. Co-location, we have adjusted our master planning principles to embed more flexibility in that, but our secret sauce very much relies on the fact that we have a very, very core group of people, a nucleus of our innovation engine co-located. And I think the notion of having minimal knowledge loss during a tech transfer, or the ability for us to move very quickly down the entire value chain of the biopharmaceutical engine is hugely important. And I think that sort of was reflected in some of the investments we made last year, both in terms of our capital costs, both in terms of our employee well-being, but also in terms of our expanded laboratory footprint. All of those were sort of very tangible surrogates for our deep commitment towards the Bay Area and towards science. And we believe that's a worthy mission to go after.
These days there's a lot of questions around recruitment and retention of talent, and how employees feel about their place of work and how they're seeing the future. What are you seeing in your company in terms of the desire of people to want to be part of this, kind of stay part of the family versus venture toward something else and experience something different?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is a nice sort of segue for me to identify a challenge that I personally am very vested in, and I think I know you are as well, Jim. Is retaining the talent, not just in the Bay Area, but within the confines of a company. Right now, retention is a big deal, and you've got to find ways to attract, retain, and develop people so that they want to work in companies in this space. So it's an ongoing challenge, and what we found is it's not just about the benefits or the compensation. A lot of it is around purpose and meaning within their work that is important. It's the way one can grow a career. It's the way they have autonomy in the way they operate. But I think there are two points here I want to make. I think that it's the retention aspect is, I think, going to be something that is a challenge that binds the various companies together, and it's something that we have to be very, very deliberate about. Is how do people work here? And that's why I love some of the priorities the council and you have, Jim, around things that are important, be it climate change, be it homelessness, be it transportation, underlying infrastructure within the Bay Area that make people really want to work and play here. The second aspect, I think, amongst the workforce right now is, besides the pandemic, the other thing that was happening last year was it shone a light on the racial injustice and inequity within the world right now. And I think how we responded was very telling. And there is going to be a deeper focus for companies and organizations that have a very, very concerted and thoughtful approach towards how they advance equity, inclusion, and diversity. And this is another area where I think the Bay Area can stand tall in terms of it's not just its position, its unequivocal position, but in the value that we see a diverse workforce have in the future of our workforce. So on those levels, I think both it's a roundabout way of sort of saying that the workforce of the future is going to be the biggest determining factor in terms of the growth of any area. The companies will gravitate to where they can get access to diverse, brilliant talent at any point in time.
Yeah, and we're doubling down on our work in our DEI committee, which I would commend you to take part in that. I think this has become a centerpiece for companies, for organizations like ours. I think, as a number of the speakers pointed out, it's our time to make a meaningful material difference on a long-term basis and not let the opportunity pass. It's one of the reasons we had the earlier panel with the leaders of the ethnic business associations of the state. So you brought, in terms of the talent, you brought it up as a challenge, which we know it is. Help me to understand some of the other challenges that you face as an industry in the Bay Area particularly, and how the Bay Area Council can kind of weigh in on things that are meaningful to your organization as you decide where to put resources and make investments. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give a contrarian response and say it's not economics alone. It's not, I think a lot of it is, you mentioned that one of the best things about the pandemic was the speed at which the life sciences industry mobilized. And I think, Jim, when it comes to decisions that I often have to make in terms of either be it footprint or things I have to recommend, a lot of it is around where my company or our companies can have agility and optionality. So I think the speed with which the business processes that surround industry can be simplified, can be operationalized, are vital to us. And today, I mean, in the 5 years I've been in Gilead, I've seen it go from a company focused primarily on virology to one focused on oncology, different modalities, different platforms. One day you're a small molecule, the other day you're a cell therapy, you're a biologics company. And I think having, and it's a challenge and an opportunity in the sense of having an ecosystem that supports the notion that innovation is not going to be stalled or stymied because of cumbersome business processes. That's the number one priority. A lot of it, I know I'm slightly contrary. I'm not going to talk about real estate prices or other things, and those are important factors. But if we are able to retain agility and optionality in our infrastructure that allows the life sciences industry to pursue science agnostic to a constraint, that's the dream situation. And I think that's where the Bay Area Council can play a vital role in driving that industry mission forward.
Yeah, the need for speed, I mentioned at the outset that while we have the economic considerations, we're not known for maybe going as quickly at solving problems we could. And, sometimes the patience wears thin. When the council back around 2003 performed a major study on the bioscience industry that was actually requested by Governor Gray Davis at the time, which led to the formation of a number of, I think it was creation of Bay Bio and a number of policy initiatives that were taken to really encourage the industry to sort of move to its next natural place. And I think it might make a lot of sense for us to consider revisiting that and seeing if we could really take a deep dive at what's happening in bioscience and what the future is. And this pandemic has been a game changer, and we don't know all of the outcomes from it. Do you think that would be something that the council should pursue?
I definitely think so. And I think even the life sciences companies in the council should collectively support this. I would definitely support that as a next step in trying to better sort of come to solutions.
Yeah, I think it seems to me that this is the next moment for biotechnology, and on the heels of what happened with COVID and what's happening in terms of investment and innovation in healthcare. If ever there was a time, this is it. I want to thank you for your leadership, Joydeep. You're terrific, and your company is doing amazing things. And I think with all the challenges that we have, I think this is a real bright spot for us, and I'm very, very proud that you and your company, see the Bay Area in this light, and we want to do everything we can to accommodate your growth and your success. So thank you for participating today. And I'd like to I'll turn this over. I don't know if she's ready to come on, but Lisa Daniels, who's the managing partner of KPMG here in the Bay Area, she is going to introduce our next panel, which will be a conversation with our new Attorney General, Rob Bonta. So Joydeep, thank you very much. And thank all of you for participating today.
My pleasure. Thanks, John.